Welcome back to the Dallas Dreamhack Regional Championship. I am Niall Joan Rivers. I'm joined in the booth today by Mason Clark. Mason, we just saw an incredibly fast match here at round 11 of the Regional Championship. We are ready to get into our backup feature match, though, which looks to be pretty exciting. On one side of it, we have Jason Yee. It is on the 5-color Legend Slogurk deck, a deck that they have been tooling and perfecting and really mastering for some time. What are your thoughts here?
I mean, this is the updated version of it. Jason posted to Twitter about this build, and basically we saw this yesterday in round number 7, I believe. Long story short, it's very similar to the other legend decks we're seeing. The other players are playing, like we saw Adam Hernandez, in second place playing. The big difference is we have Ellis as another combo kill, and then we have Pest Control in the sideboard. So what it's doing this weekend is basically saying, hey, I want to be able to combo a little bit more in the mirrors, right? I want to be a little bit better at it than you are. And then I need to have cards for Toxic, which we saw, doing very well in that backup, our main feature match there with Jesse. And I also need Pest Control for things like Boros Convoke, which actually defeated Jason in the top 8 of the Pro Tour just a couple of weeks ago. So Jason very much like, hey, I can beat everything else. I'm going to stretch my mana just a little bit to add these answers to these problematic matchups.
Yeah, very cool. Very excited to see it pilot this deck. It's going to be up against Christian Valenti on Azorius Control. Now, we watched a little bit of Azorius Control played earlier. Do you think there are any big differences between Christian's list and what we saw earlier today?
The biggest one is we're down a Jace, up a Hullbreaker Horror. Now, it's funny. Jason actually describes what is the Slurger combination as, but if not Hullbreaker Horror, where like you can kind of loop everything in Odawara over and over again. But Christian just has the actual thing, no knockoff, the premium. And I think this is a card that could matter a lot because what Christian needs to do is needs to prevent Jason from assembling its cards in a combination to overpower Christian. But if we have Hullbreaker Horror, that's going to win the game very quickly with that 7-8 body and make it so, let's say it goes to play an empty. Well, Christian goes, all right, no more lies. Even though you can pay, I'll bounce your Relic of Legends to your hand, right? And makes it very hard for Jason to assemble the pieces. Now, it is going to require Christian getting to the late game, but if we get there, we actually have a way to maybe break things up and win in a much more timely way. This matchup can be very tough in some instances. We saw at the Pro Tour how this became a bit of a problem in some of the matchups, but in others, the 4-color deck just ran it over. And it really matters a lot on player skill, piloting, and the way the cards line up and the way we sequence and what we decide to fight over. So I'm very excited to see these two very strong players go head to head here.
Yeah, well, we are ready with our match. Let's get down into it and watch these two incredible players. Looks like we have resolved our mulligans, and it's going to be Christian on the play here as Jason plays a Proving Ground tapped for turn. We go back over to Christian, who, in the fashion of Azorius Control, land go. And we're going to see a Rona for turn 2 for Jason, kind of the dream turn 2 play.
Yeah, off of Cavern of Souls, no less. So, the best play followed by the ability is, Christian would love to know more lies. That can't, though. Cavern of Souls has named humans.
Yeah, but gets to cast one of my favorite cards, a Deduce, draw a card, make a clue. We're going to see third land and pass back to Jason.
Yeah, we talked about Jason top 8 at the Pro Tour just a couple weeks ago, has been dominating Magic now for a little bit and, really been on the uprise. Christian Valenti, if you're an old school player, someone who used to play a lot of Magic, never had, Pro Tour top 8 success quite like this, but is definitely someone who's been around the block.
Yeah, and we are going to see Honest Rutstein come down, which is going to trigger Rona and also be able to get back, that Rona that's in the yard currently.
Which, isn't it's nice, right? Like it gives Jason another card to discard to the Rona and gives it some protection, but it's not as nice as something like getting an NT, like getting another piece. The legendary creature, sometimes they do get clogged, and that's why Rona is such an important part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we see Jason had the checklist cards, but one of the things with the checklist cards is when they enter play, you need to like switch it out. So you see a Rona face up in Jason's hand because it moved it out and just took the real card. And it's like, whatever. We all know, who cares.
Yeah, it's really funny. All right, we are going to see a Sunken Citadel for Christian. Looks like it is on white. And he is going to pass back over to Jason, who's going to activate Rona during the end step.
Yeah, normally in a matchup, you might see Ronan just get discarded again, if the matchup doesn't have a lot of interaction, something like Boros Convoke. In this matchup, you're not expecting this Ronan to live for very long. If it does, you're probably winning.
Oh, Duress from Jason. Great card against these control decks. Christian deciding if and how he wants to respond. It's just going to let it resolve. We see a Jason, No More Lies, a March, a Get Lost, and a bunch of lands.
Yeah, worth noting, Jason has 1 Duress in the main deck. And, Jason, very smart about how these things play, probably is trying to resolve something big this turn if we're Duressing now. Because if we weren't really going to do anything, we probably would see Jason wait, right? Unless, it had a hard read, it'd be something where it's like, I can wait and I have big spells I want to play.
Yeah. Well, it has a Slogurk in hand. Oh, and also a Relic of Legends. Very big.
Yeah, Relic of Legends, huge with Rona, because Rona's going to untap every time you cast a creature like this Slogurk.
Yeah. So we are going to cast the Slogurk, trigger Rona.
Yeah, and the Slogurk does cost 1 less because of Rusty.
Right. And it looks like with the Rona trigger on the stack, Christian might be, it looks like, is going to get lost to the Rona.
Yeah, it's going to get lost to Rona. And this is, you might be thinking, why didn't Christian do this before the Relic hit the board? We know Jason has a Rona in hand, so Jason can just redeploy. But Christian's basically doing this as a way to try and stop any looting and maybe, getting dangerously close to getting combo killed here if there was something like a Takanuma.
Yep, and it looks like we are going to sack a map token, see the Elisal Core on the top, put a counter on the Slogurk, go ahead and bin it, and pass back over to Christian.
Yeah, by putting it in the graveyard, it means it can't get No More Lied, and Christian in his main deck has nothing that can exile. Now, post board, there typically some people play cards like Kotzel's Flanker that would be able to get it, but I believe Christian is not able to remove that card from the graveyard, which means Takanuma will eventually get it back.
Yeah, and back over to Christian now, making sure he has looked at all of Jason's board and understands sort of what it has here. Looks like we might be marching the Relic.
Yeah, and then Jason says, I'm going to Otawara.
Oh, brutal.
Really? Yeah, and you see from Christian, he tapped out on his main phase to do that because he knew how important this card was. And Jason obviously knew how important it was too, and used the Otawara to bounce it back to the hand. And this is one of the things that can happen, like it looks like Jason doesn't have access to a ton of mana, but just does because of Relic and the cost reduction. That's one of the things about this deck. It is so good at just using all of its mana and using every single card it plays.
Right, and it looks like we have another Honest Rusty in hand, as well as a Kellen Daring Traveler.
Yeah, I believe Jason is almost at combo, because what's happening now is the Rona makes it so like you get 1 mana. The Rusty is removing another mana. So when we play the Slogurk, it can tap for itself, but we don't have quite enough lands because we need Takanuma to keep bouncing the Slogurk. But we can use Honest Rusty to cast and pick up Rusty. So once we're able to get the black-white creature Ellis out of the graveyard, we will have a lethal kill. It's just a matter of, can we get that this turn with a Takanuma?
Yeah. Looks like we have played another Cavern, this time on Ooze.
If you're Christian Valenti, that's bad news. You can see Christian kind of lean in and smiling. He's like, why did your name Ooze? Why would you do such a silly thing like that?
Yeah, and we're going to play the second Honest Rusty to get back the Ellis. Otawara, Honest Rusty. Play him again. Get back the other one. Here's Ellis, and that is the engine assembled. Wow.
Yeah, I thought Jason was a little short, but no, Jason showed us, no, I have like 40 mana available to me. And the kill there is the Rusting is getting played. Legend rule, kill it, target the same one to come back. Ellis pings every time a creature dies on your side of the battlefield. So Christian Valenti died there while trying to stop that from happening. And honestly, I think if he had waited, it wouldn't have been much better for him.
Yeah,
was
I
just dead.
mean, really, really tough position there. And Jason really showing that it is the master of the Slogurk deck. Now, what do you think it wants to do game two sideboard wise?
Whatever Jason does is right. No, but if I had to guess, I would imagine cards like Urtai Resurrected is nice here. That's a great way to stop one of these bigger spells like Sunfall from coming down. We could also see things like Lorraine the Third Path come in if Christian has anything in his sideboard that could be causing a problem. Rest in Peace is a card that can be a little frustrating, so we might see that. The Duresses are definitely coming in. Those are the cards that I'm pretty confident in. I can even see Jace the Perfected Mind coming in. It's a way to draw some cards, and there are some weird Jace kills where you like mill your opponent for like 12, then you Otawara it back, where you Takanuma it back, play it again, mill them again, and that can be kind of nice against these decks. It really depends on how many cards Jason has in the main deck that it feels won't line up well against Christian's deck.
Sure. And let's take a quick look back at Christian's deck and see how we think he might want to prepare for this game too.
Yeah, Christian's got his money cut out for him here. So, negate is not something that's super good, but fights over the relic. So you might be a little tempted there. Rest in Peace stops the graveyard, but doesn't stop the creature problem. So that's going to be really awkward. Console Flanker is like a knockoff Rest in Peace. But, once again, is that really going to matter? Chrome Host Sea Shark is something I imagine we probably want because Christian just needs to win the game. And Tashani's Tidebinder is something that can stop some of these triggers from activating and get stuff back. But really, it depends, how many cards does Christian have in his main deck. We just talked about a lot of cards being very reasonable there. So I'm going to be curious to see how Christian wants to play this game. He has a lot of options available to him, and they're all kind of meh. And we kind of saw, like, how I mentioned in this matchup, things can sometimes be awkward, right? Like the blue-white control player can just pick you apart. That's kind of what the deck does. You never quite assemble your pieces, and you fall over. Jason having the Rona, having the Caverns where the Rona could hit play, and then just basically, having that pocket Rona the whole game as well, just meant it could assemble its plan, and that is so hard for Christian to beat. So Christian needs to break that up while assembling pressure, because if Christian doesn't get pressure, the matchup is so easy for Jason. We can just reassemble that kind of stuff constantly. It's the pressure from Christian. That's why I highlighted the Hullbreaker Horror going into game one. I don't know if it's going to stay in for game two. I could see us maybe going down that on some cheaper cards, but Christian needs to win the game quickly. We can't sit here and just deduce all day. That is not a winning line against Jason.
Yeah, well, game two is ready, so let's get right into it and see how these players do. This time, of course, and kind of an interesting hand here. We've got the Deluge. It looks like we do have the Kutzel's Flanker.
Yeah, I talked about it. It's kind of like fine, maybe just bring it in like you need a body or whatever. And then Christian's on this multi section. It's like, yeah, I mean, I sideboarded it, but it's not what I need right now. I kind of need to draw this card in the later game.
Yeah, let's go ahead and put that on bottom. And this is going to be Kellen on turn 2 for Jason with the Cavern of Souls again. Uncounterable.
Yeah, Kellen is one of the other things you get from being white. It creates maps, which theoretically can come up, but really it's just like another 2-mana combo piece, another 2-mana thing you can play, and then gets you some incidental advantage by attacking with it. And the Slogurk deck is looking to just get a lot of incidental advantage that eventually, when combined together, is overwhelming.
Yeah, so not quite the turn 2 Rona, but still pretty nice here. We're going to see for Christian the Sunken Citadel on white.
Yeah, and the more I see this 5-color Legends deck that Jason has here, the more I can't help but think that this is maybe just one of the best decks in Standard. Because one of my big problems before was like I didn't really love your like Toxic matchup, didn't really love your Convoke matchup. I thought those were kind of tougher than maybe some of the other Slogurk players felt it was. But Jason moving to get these pest controls and get this cleaner kill as well, which isn't what the deck has to do. The deck can just play a normal game, but getting access to a cleaner, easier kill matters a ton. So I think this deck is definitely one to keep an eye on and look out for. I know we're nearing the end of this Standard's lifespan, but there are lots of other tournaments going to go on with this format, and I'm curious to see sort of if this deck sort of reigns supreme, and we're looking back in a couple of years on 5-color Slugger sort of being the de facto best deck.
Yeah, I mean, definitely with how well Jason is able to pilot it, it always seems just oppressively strong whenever whenever it's behind the wheel. Now we do see, it picked up a Rona off of the Kellen trigger last turn. Looks like we're binning a Plaza of Heroes this turn, which of course puts a counter on the Slogurk. I think we also have an Honest Rusty in hand. But it looks like we are actually going to be playing. What is the name of this card? It's the OTJ. Plan the Heist. That's it. So we'll be plotting a Plan the Heist.
Yeah, and Plan the Heist, if you haven't seen that card, it's Surveil 3, and if you have no cards in hand, then draw 3.
No. If you have no cards in hand, you do the Surveil, right? Like you always get to draw 3?
Excuse me. Yes, I misspoke there. I said it backwards. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you always have to draw 3, but if you have no cards in hand, you have to set up your draws. And, honestly, I think now this is a card we might be seeing a bit more of. When Memory Deluge leaves, blue-white control players are going to have to, find some other way to get card advantage. So I'm going to be curious to see if that card becomes a bit more common as Sunfall comes down.
Yeah, Sunfall comes down, gets rid of a couple of these creatures. We see a Relic in hand for Jason. And looks like we're going to go ahead and cast that, Plan the Heist for free. We drew an Urtai and 2 lands, it looked like.
Yeah, I can't imagine those were the best draws. Urtai is a good card, but you need to kind of have the setup on board already so you can maximize Urtai.
Right, so Relic, Rona comes down.
And we see Jason figuring out what it wants to do. Just going to play a Triumph and pass.
Yep. Just Triumph and pass, but I mean, Relic and Rona, 2 pretty big parts of the engine. We'll see if Christian has answers.
And worth noting, Jason, 7 cards in hand.
Yeah.
It only looks like 6 mana in play with the Relic, but really 7 with the Rona, and let's be honest, really like 13 with the Rona. So Christian is in a really tough spot here.
Yeah, and Jason gets to untap, activate Rona. Looks like we are discarding another Relic.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier. The first Relic is unbelievable for the deck, and the second Relic is unbelievably bad for the deck. It just, get a little bit of protection, but not anything great.
Yep, and we're going to cast Rusty, which is going to trigger the Rona to untap.
Yeah, the Humans is on Cavern, but what really Christian's thinking about is, do I kill this Rona now before it untaps, gets another loot on? Worth noting, this is a cast trigger, so Jason could loot in response to the Rusty, discard a card, then if the Rusty hits play, which it almost assuredly will, given there's a Cavern, it can then pick up the creature it discards, which is the Urtai here. Only thing Jason had to stop this was a Tashani's Tidebinder. And little things like that matter a ton. We basically just turned it into a raw draw card there.
Yeah, very, very powerful for sure. We're going to play Plaza as our land for turn. And Jason's just going to pass from there, holding up the Urtai.
Yeah, and you see Christian into turn has things like Field of Ruin available to him. He could get rid of one of these annoying caverns, but part of the problem, Niall, is that the Slogurk just gets the lands back later. So Christian might need to find something that's a bit better to use, but might also just have to Field of Ruin in the hopes that, we can counter any Slogurks that do come down if we get rid of the Ooze land.
Sure. But we also do know about the Urtai, which... Oh, looks like we're actually going to Field of Ruin the Plaza of Heroes.
I like this. That opens up Jason obviously could or tie something like a Wandering Emperor here, but also could just use the land to give indestructible / hexproof. And we just see Jason doing it.
Yeah.
And that's going to fizzle the Field of Ruin. So now Christian and Jason both don't get to search their libraries respectively for that land, which means, for Jason, who has 1,000,001 mana, doesn't really care. For Christian, who's tight on mana, kind of a big deal.
Yeah, kind of a big deal indeed. Looks like we are Otawara-ing the Relic.
Notably puts Jason to 8 cards in hand, has to move to discard. Get it, Jason. No point left on the table there. And, we're joking. That Relic going back to Jason's hand matters a lot, because now if Christian, all right, Christian's going to wipe the board, but if Christian, maybe didn't have an answer, could have answered the Relic, and we saw one get discarded, and that's going to turn off Jason's whole engine. So,
yeah, I mean, this is kind of what you were talking about before this game, where you were saying what Azorius Control really wants to do is just sort of pick apart this Legends deck and just never let you assemble the engine, never let you get your pieces together. That's going to be 2 relics for Jason.
Yeah, I like this. Jason, we talked about the second relic really doesn't matter that much, right? But Jason has all these spells in hand, and a lot of them are reactive, it seems. So you might as well get these 2 relics down. That way Christian can't do something like March of Otherworldly Light and put you in an awkward position again. And now you get to go into this turn with, a bunch of mana, Christian kind of tight on mana, and you have these caverns, so some of your spells are going to resolve.
Right, and it looks like we're grabbing the Ooze land, so Slogurk, I think, is coming down. Yep.
Overslime, indeed.
We're going to play a forest with our land for turn and just pass with, 7 mana up?
Yeah, 7 mana up, and I think Jason still has 1 Triome in hand. And if this Slogurk leaves play, we're probably going to see a cycle this Triome in response and then get them back, so we're going to keep drawing cards. But looks like we're going to Urtai first.
Urtai, the Memory Deluge.
Yeah,
turn your 2 cards from a look at 7 into 1 card that you don't get to pick.
Yeah, and notably, the 7 is the big part of that. That was Christian's whole turn cycle, was trying to set up that Memory Deluge. Now, Christian already got cards earlier, but that commitment of time really matters. We talked about how we were picking it apart there, but couldn't quite get it done there. So Christian's in an awkward spot.
Yeah. And we know Jason has an Otawara in hand. And easily, any way you want to slice it, has the mana to channel it.
Yeah, and that, one of the things about the Slogurk deck in general is it's just so resilient. And when it gets Slogurk going and has any of the channel lands, it just kind of gets weirdly ahead on cards, because they, all the channel lands are spells that are kind of overcosted and attached to a land, except for Boseiju, which we don't talk about. And that means it's a really awkward spot. So, Christian here, Sunfalling, that's great, theoretically, that can get rid of the Overslime. But if Jason has something like Otawara, which Jason does, now it's going to go back to hand, and then the Slogurk is going to return those lands. So now, Jason just 1 for 1, and, bought some time, but doesn't have the answer spells to keep going through this stuff.
Yeah, very, very powerful response there. I mean, Christian has been doing a good job of, just bit by bit, slowly taking care of these things. He's going ahead and flip this Incubate token, get in for 2. I mean, at some point, you got to start chipping away the life total, right?
Yep. And, Christian's done a great job, like you said, of picking apart. Jason has done a better job of basically playing the same 3 cards over and over again and only losing 2 of them. Christian has answered, a little bit of the cycle every time, but Jason hasn't really gone down that many cards. And really his only problem is we drew a bunch of, Triomes. So instead of having spells to overwhelm, we've had these Triomes that we've had to slowly accrue value with.
Yeah, and we're going to see NT on Slogurk as the play for Jason here.
Worth noting too, I think that was Christian's 3rd Sunfall.
It was.
Christian only has 3 Sunfalls. And you saw Jason check. So Jason knows in this open decklist tournament, all right, Christian has no more Sunfalls. I don't need to worry about that card. Only Temporary Lockdown is something that can really clean up all of my cards.
Right.
And even then, it doesn't clean up the Gurk. Not that anything really does.
And we are back to Christian's turn now. He's, in a really tight spot here, trying to figure out how to deal with Jason's board.
And you're seeing too how like Jason's deck building with this deck, and as everyone's worked together to refine the Slogurk deck over time, it really sets up inevitability and reminds me a lot kind of the Lantern control deck. So say hi to any YouTube documentary in the future talking about the Slogurk deck using this clip here. But the Slogurk deck is weirdly this like nothing we've seen in Magic in a really long time. It just uses so many different weird pieces, and honestly is inspired a lot by how many legendary payoffs and creatures there are these days, combined with Slogurk, which, let's be honest, is a card that looks like it was kind of like, oh, maybe this would create some cool draft archetype, maybe a cool commander, and just works so well with everything, and is sort of a miracle. And this deck even exists. It just is so many different and weird pieces.
Yeah, and as that Boseiju takes care of the Sunken Citadel, we are going to see a Jace Perfected Mine off the NT trigger. So it looks like that was brought in from the sideboard.
Yeah, and that's going to be a card that can mill Christian out, give us some card advantage, and with Takenuma we can pick it up over and over and over again.
So we are going to cast it, and as you just said, there is a Takenuma in hand. There's also an Otawara in hand.
Christian can respond and try and fight over the Jace, but if we don't exile the Jace,
it's like it's going to be a 3 steps ahead.
Yeah, and this is one of those things, right? 3 steps ahead is such a powerful card. It let Christian use all his mana. He got to catalog, draw 2 and discard 1. But Jason is just going to use all of its mana and get back the Jace and sort of keep going and going and going. And it just doesn't, like, these kind of clunkier cards just don't make the exchanges nearly as well.
All right, so we're going to channel Takenuma here. Get Jace back to hand.
The only thing really bad for Jason right now is it doesn't have Rona in play, which is like where a lot of the mana rebate happens. But still, I mean, look at what's happening to Christian here. Just getting torn apart.
Right, so it looks like we are just playing Urtai.
I love this play from Jason. Jason was like, I want to have access to this Urtai off Takenuma and get, you Urtai locked, and essentially you won't be able to win the game. I'll Takenuma the Urtai if you counter it. I'll Otawara it if you let it resolve, and I'll play it again. And then I'll bounce my Slogurk to get back. You know what I mean? It's just going to be forever. And Jason's assembling this lock where I essentially invalidate all your draw steps, which is why, I mentioned the Lantern deck earlier. You just get to a point where Christian's not even playing Magic against you, let alone the combo kill will eventually hit.
Yeah, and we are going to go ahead and play land for turn and pass.
Yeah, and you can see Christian's face. He's like, what am I supposed to do here? Like, I don't have Sunfalls. Jason's it's not even really tapped out,
No, not at all.
Yeah, and you can see its brain is turning there as there's the tapping of the Overslime while we're still tapped out for Christian. Looks like Jason just wants to bounce one of the incubate tokens.
And looks like bringing Slogurk back to hand, getting Boseiju, Otawara, Takenuma back.
Yep. And then when you discard to clean up, you get the NT trigger. That is on my bingo board. Bingo! Cleanup step, put a trigger on the stack. We got to go back and get priority again. Congratulations to me, as Slogurk is a card that we can cast until the next turn. And you see Christian kind of smile and shake his head like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Try and figure out a way to win?
Yeah, extremely tough spot.
I guess if Christian has like Jace, he can maybe like rope-a-dope Jason long enough that Jason feels like it can go for the combo. Can't fully get there because Christian has something, has milled enough cards, and then Christian somehow gets underneath the Urtais. And then plays Jace and mills Jason for like exactly enough that Jason dies in the draw step.
Yeah, so we're gonna see Honest Rutstein get played. Looks like it's going to get back a Kellen from the yard. Here's the uncounterable, discounted Slogurk. Play Otawara's land for turn.
Yeah, and Jason is just going to apply some pressure now and, just put Christian in the same awkward position we've been in, but now we're finally starting to work on the life total.
Yep. And swinging in here. It's like going to blocks. We're going to block the Urtai.
It reminds me of that meme from, Breaking Bad, or Walter White's in the car and he's like, no, Christian, there's a Takanuma in hand. It's going to come back. Don't block, Christian. But we'll have to see. Christian does have cards like Tashane's Tidebinder, which can stop some of this.
It's like an Iganjo is going to come down onto the Inti.
I love it from Christian. I, too, have Kamigawa lands. Get gone.
Right. These creatures are going to trade.
Notably, Jason did play Otawara for turn, so that Cavern of Souls can't get played.
All right, so Jason going to play the adventure side of Kellen, which is going to get 2 map tokens, and then just play Kellen as a creature. And passes with just only 7 mana up.
Yeah, only 7 mana with the sneaky Urtai, which is technically face up. Yeah. But is also sort of secretly face up. Like, Christian has a lot to think about and, has to make plays eventually. It's a very tough spot to be.
Yeah, this deck feels so powerful because, Jason is, for one, almost always at 7 cards in hand. We've seen it have to discard in the cleanup step multiple times, but also often has, 1 or 3 more cards in the NT exile zone. And then also has access to most of its graveyard most of the time. It often feels like Jason just has like a 20 card hand all the time.
Yeah. It is very impressive what the Slogurk deck is able to do. You see Christian has the Tashane's Tidebinder, so might be able to get something.
All right, as we're going to see a Boseiju on the field. Which looks like we're just going to crack in response.
Yeah, which means Christian won't get the shuffle off the Boseiju. Won't get the search off the Boseiju, but we'll get the field. Looks like Jason is out of basics. Actually, not even sure if Jason has a basic land in the 5-color deck. Okay, there is a forest. Excuse me, that's my bad. But Christian, notably here, blew up the Ooze Cavern of Souls, right? Makes a lot of sense. You want to counter Slogurk. Here's the problem. Slogurk comes back to hand. We're going to pick up Cavern of Souls. So it's not even like Christian did anything wrong. He's just in this weird sort of like never-ending nightmare for himself where he never gets like a chance to do anything.
Yeah, what is the graveyard if not an extension of Jason's hand?
Yeah. And you're seeing all of Christian's friends in the background have slowly been watching, and they're slowly all starting to turn away because they kind of know the writing's on the wall for Christian. As he's trying his best to set up. And you did see Christian ask Jason how many cards in deck, but Jason knows it's open deck list that the Jace could be what Christian's trying to fight, as Christian is fighting over the Takanuma now.
Sure. So looks like we are countering the Takanuma trigger, or maybe
I believe
the Slogurk.
I believe we're countering Takanuma because Christian said the Slogurk trigger resolves on the Slogurk going up, I think. There's obviously a lot of stuff moving zones, but I think Jason has another Takanuma Nile, which... Yeah. Oh, it was on the Slogurk. Oh, no, it was on Takanuma, excuse me.
No, it looks like it was on the Slogurk.
Oh, it was. Okay. Excuse me, that's my bad.
Right, so Slogurk is tidebound. Jason has an Urtai in hand. Off the Takanuma also has an Urtai in the graveyard. So kind of like having two Urtais.
Yeah, and Jason can also like legend rule to get a new Slogurk. Obviously, you won't get any abilities there. So I think it does check last known information, but honestly, I'm going to be very impressed if Christian can, maneuver in such a way to get Jason milled out. And it seems like that's his plan. He's. I also love his attitude. He's like, "Listen, I got one route to victory. Things are bad. I'm just gonna be here. Might as well."
It looks like we are going to combat, tapping for mana. Going to combat. We are triggering the Kellen.
Yep. There's like a little chump block happening there.
Yep. Christian protecting his life total.
How many different ways can I say it has assembled a Turing machine that is unstoppable? Let's find out as Jason starts to tap its mana, which means bad things for Christian.
Right, and here is the Slogurk.
This is weird too because you could legend rule the new one and keep the bigger Slogurk just to get the lands back. I'm not sure if that's better because the Tidebinder is stopping the other Slogurk, but it is worth noting that like that is an available option. So if Jason wants to do something like Urtai that Tidebinder later, it's fine. And also Jason knows, the wraths are gone and my Slogurk is bigger than most things you have. So
Although looks like that Slogurk is going to get 3 steps ahead. He's going to counter it, assuming that is able to resolve, which Jason does let it resolve.
And notably now, I think Jason is down to only like 5 cards in hand.
Oh no.
Unfortunately, Jason was 4 steps ahead with the Slogurk. Oh, and you see now Jason's asking Christian, how many cards are in your deck, friend? As I think Jason is really close to actually getting the Jace like mill out of nowhere here, as Christian is down to only 1 mana up. And looks like they were asking something with the judge just confirming.
Yeah, we are at a very very pivotal part of this match, but also a very complex part.
Yeah, and that's the nice part about the Slogurk deck is, sometimes now when you play Magic, there's a lot you can learn, but you get to your third, 400th game, with a deck, maybe something like Convoke, you learn some little things, you learn some nuances of the matchup. You don't quite get as much out as you might get from a different matchup. Slogurk, you can play for about 1,000 games before I'm sure you're even getting close to like that ceiling of things where it's like, oh, there's less I can learn from this, or maybe I had better spent playing other decks to learn here. And Jason has shown that to us by playing 10,000 Slogurk games.
Right, and it did, as you were talking about, choose to sacrifice the new Slogurk to the Legend rule, get back a Boseiju, Otawara, and the Cavern of Souls.
Yeah, and I think Jason's seeing it like, oh, I just, if you're ever going to do something to my Slogurk I care about, I'll just Otawara your Tidebinder.
Right. Or Urtai your Tidebinder, or
Yeah.
there's so many ways to, or Plaza of Hero, just like 100 choices all the time. And they all seem extremely powerful.
Yep. I might Urtai your spell and then Otawara my Urtai after I tap it for mana, and it would cost only 1. So now it's like it costs 0. Then I'm going to counter your next thing, and you're going to draw a card. Then I'm going to play Jace and mill you for exact lethal because you had the gall to cast a spell against me when I had the Urtai lock. And thank goodness Jason did not ask to randomize the 2 cards. does look like Christian's maybe thinking about casting something on his main phase. Maybe he's just lining up his mana, but
It looks like we are going to Otawara the Tidebinder.
and like we talked about before, Jason knows there are no more board wipes that can kill something like the Slogurk. Jason knows there are a couple cards that could kill it, like maybe a Wandering Emperor with that Hullbreaker Horror if we had more mana that could like eat it in combat. But for the most part, Jason just has Christian in this very awkward spot, and it forces Christian to once again deploy the Tidebinder for more mana. It could be really awkward.
It looks like Christian going to attempt the Get Lost on the Slogurk. It looks like Jason might be deploying one of the other. Oh, yeah. How about just another Otawara on the Tidebinder?
Yeah. And this is an interesting spot, too, because I don't think Christian really gets a chance to Tidebinder the Gurk again. Like that trigger has already been missed from the first one getting channeled. This thing will already be in the graveyard. So it's not like Christian going to be like, okay, I'll let this resolve before my Get Lost resolves, or Tidebinder it again so you don't get lands. Christian is in a very awkward spot. We also see Christian just has cards in hand like Rest in Peace that he feels like he can't deploy despite wanting to because of the Urtai. So he has to set up some sort of weird spot. But the Get Lost resolves, and Jason is like, yup, I will get back my 2 Otawaras and Takanuma. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, very, very powerful play there.
And
as we go back over to Jason's turn.
I mean, I think so. I didn't get a good look at what Christian was counting or like what he mouthed for the cards in deck, but I think Christian was at about 30-ish. And I think Jason with the Jace can mill out Christian if Jason can just clear the way. And Jason has about 15, 18-ish cards left there. That was not a lot of increments of 3 being counted by Christian.
Yeah. I think somewhere around 18 to 20 or something like that. But gonna swing in with the creatures here. Not Christian's life total down a little bit.
All right, we're playing Cavern. We're naming a different thing. We took the Ooze paper out.
Looks like just another human cavern. Oh, and here's Rona.
All right. Now Jason goes from 20 million mana to 60 million mana. And if there was a doubt about being able to Jace Christian on mana before, it shouldn't be as big a problem now, as Rona, essentially reduces them all by 1.
All right, and here comes the Jace.
And it's so funny, Jason bounced Christian's Tidebinder, and Christian's like, I know Jason knows I have this Tidebinder. Jason knows I can Tidebinder the Jace, so clearly something's going to happen. There's this Urtai that I can see face up, but is there anything else that can happen to me? Like, what else can the Slogurk deck do in this spot?
I think the answer to that is about 24 different things.
Yeah. I also think Jason is very close to starting to be able to sage you down Christian's Lance. All right, so Christian's counting. It looks like he's just checking to see, will I die if you Jace me twice?
And it looks like there was a March in hand as well.
Yeah, I wonder if Christian maybe needed to March pitching the Rest in Peace to get the Rona off the table or slow it down a little bit. I'm unsure, but Jason goes, not a worry. And I really like this from Jason. You might see a lot of people just go for, the sort of killish here, right? But Jason doesn't really need... Okay, it looks like Jason is actually going to take a look. Originally was not about it, but now that Christian's saying, okay, I'm down to, go to end step, Jason wants to double check, and looks like the deuce is the play.
Yep. Draw a card, get a clue, or you're going to crack it immediately, draw another card. All right, Christian needs to make something big happen here.
Yeah, and now we're going to get a count here. 9, 12, 15. I think that's 15 exactly. Might be 16. It's a little hard to tell. But also, Christian's got to do something where just going to be dead on board, dead to the mills, dead to the lock, dead in the heart. And Jason does those 2 cards on the board war in Jason's hand. Jason's picking them up so it's a little cleaner to make sure we know what's lands and what's not in play.
Yep, and it looks like Christian will be playing his Jace here.
All right, this is the moment. Fireworks are going to happen.
Yep. Now we've got the Urtai, of course. The uncounterable Urtai at that.
So we do have Tidebinder, which can hit the Urtai trigger. And it looks like we have March, Rest in Peace, and I think a land in hand for Christian.
Yeah, so looks like we have the Rona trigger on the stack right now.
Yeah, and notably the Urtai is an enter the battlefield trigger, I believe.
Yes.
So, Christian can't be like, in response to your Rona untapping and you have more mana, I'm going to, Tashani's Tidebinder the Urtai trigger. This just hasn't hit play yet. So Christian has to let the Rona untap if he is going to have an out.
Sure, unless his plan is to march the Rona before Urtai hits.
Yeah, and then that will stop some of the mana. Maybe Christian's hoping by like marching the Rona, I can get Jason to tap out.
So he's gonna let it resolve. That trigger is gonna go on the stack, trying to stop the Jace. Then we are gonna see the Tidebinder come down.
Yeah, and the Tidebinder is definitely gonna go for the Urtai trigger. And I think what Christian's trying to do is maybe set up when Jason tries to like Otawara its own Urtai to march the Urtai. Now I think Jason has another one in Graveyard.
Sure. But then we've also got the plazas to worry about when that occurs. So there's Takenuma. Taking a look here.
And
Takenuma's good. 3 lands off Takenuma. Get back Urtai. I don't think Christian has any way to stop this from happening.
I don't think so either.
Well, that is going to be a good game from Christian. And Jason going to be 9-1-1 going into our next round. What an incredible display of mastery over this deck. It is clearly put in the hours. It clearly knows what it's doing. And that was a clinic. That was a master class. What did you think of that match, Mason?
It really was something. It kind of showed like just how when everything gets going, and even like not fully going, right, but just a little momentum, how bad it can be for blue-white if you don't have something that can start closing the door and you just give them time. And Christian never had time to pressure Jason, and Jason just had forever to keep reassembling. We talked about how, Jason would play like 2 things, and then Christian would try to get a 2-for-1, and then Jason would do a little bit of magic and basically be only down 1 card, and then sort of just did that over and over and over again. And that draw 3 in the mid game just really sort of refueled us, made it so we could overwhelm Christian, and there just wasn't time for Christian to close the door. So impressive gameplay on both parts to make the game that close, but still a lot of magic left to be played, and you got to be tired after that one.
Yeah, a lot of magic left to be played indeed, and we're going to get right back to it after a quick break. We'll see you in a few.